So we're recording. This is a live training that we're doing with Medical Device Academy. We have Mary Votter and Sharon. I'm going to mispronounce the last name. Morrow.
Morrow.
Morrow. Okay. As our experienced project managers for 510K submissions, and then we have Mary Martinez and Bhumika, and once again, last name Jayappa. Okay. She's going to nod her head that I did that adequately. We all know I didn't do it perfectly. If you want to record it for me, then I'll just listen to it on a tape when I go on a walk over and over and over again until I get it perfect. Because I mean, it took me 10 years, but I finally learned how to roll my R's. I learned that much of Dutch and Spanish to roll an R, but even Mary would say it's okay. So this training is a live training and it's an internal training, but we're publishing it live to people because two reasons. One, it gives you a little look behind the scenes, um, what we do at Medical Device Academy. And, it's not just training publicly for marketing purposes, it's also training internally to make us better. We want to get our systems as good as they can be, because if there's a mistake in a submission, it's not because somebody's a bad person or incompetent, it's that our systems aren't strong enough. So we use templates for everything where we can. And if there's something we can templatize or proceduralize to make it more consistent, that's what we want to do. And so I'm going to have a couple of examples of that as we go through this, and maybe Mary or Sharon will have some additional examples that they can think of and suggestions, because we can just pause what we're doing on the training and open up the notes section just like we do for a manager review and type in some notes. Hey, do this. So that's what we'll do for this training, and the whole thing's live so you can see behind the scenes. Okay, so please don't hesitate to unmute your mic and comment on anything as we go. But the first thing I'm going to do here is remember to share my screen. Okay. So we have everybody's video over here on the side, so I'm going to minimize those. Well, no, we'll keep it. We'll keep it. We'll make it work. And this is a new slide deck that we had somebody develop for us. So the reason why I wanted to get a new slide deck is I haven't really put a lot of thought and effort into design elements of a slide deck, and I try to keep it very minimalist: a white background, black text, bold, not a lot of font choices, to try to make it easy to read. And that's functional, but when you do nothing but videos for a living, you got to up your game a little bit. So I'm trying to up my game here. So I got professional help, and this is what we came up with in about 48 hours. So I think it was time and money well spent. But if anybody has any suggestions, don't hesitate. From the audience, if you're watching this on YouTube, please put comments that, hey, you ought to do this, you ought to do that. We like this, we don't like that. You can comment on our design elements too, because that's an area I want to improve. But we're really focused on here content. What has been your experience with RTA checklists and responding to the FDA when they have deficiency they identified? So that's the topic of today's training. The agenda is really short and sweet, but we're going to get in depth in things, and we're going to go off the slide deck and look at some actual examples of stuff. So number one, table of contents change. Mary and I had a debrief for the client that she recently got 510K clearance for. I think she got it in almost record time. I keep on having to check, like, did she do this as a third-party review or what? Because it seemed really fast to me. So this was an AI product. So for those of you that are like, do you have any experience with AI software and software as a medical device? Yes, we do. And Mary has more experience, like twice as much as I do, but I've gotten one through, Mary's gotten a couple through, and we're working on multiple projects like that right now. So yes, we have that experience, but this client had a great suggestion because they had done some of the work before on their own as a pre-sub, and we didn't have that in our initial submission because we weren't involved in that. And it was just, we forgot to ask the question. So we added something to the table of contents to prompt us of that. So I'll cover that in a moment. Number two, I want to show people where the RTA guidance is, because I saw on Joe Hage's medical device group um, Slack channel, he actually had somebody ask, "Is this the most recent version of the RTA guidance?" And they made several different versions, and there is a most recent one, and that's the one you should be using, particularly if you're going to fill out an RTA checklist for somebody. Then I'm going to cover the key pieces, which is how to respond to the reviewer, both for RTA holds and AI requests. And then I'm going to cover the impact of if you implement eStar templates. And because I did the eStar template video like this weekend, I haven't actually come up with a solution yet. So that's where I need input from you guys and need some action items. What are we going to do to deal with eStar? Because it's a little bit different workflow than what we normally do. I don't think we're going to have any problem with it, but we got to figure that out. So, number one, updated table of contents. There is a new table of contents template that's in our Dropbox folder. So, Medical Device Academy has a Dropbox folder. Not all of it's public, some of it's private because I have like 1,000 folders for different companies and projects over the years, and we don't want to share that confidential information, so we do it all by folder compartmentalization, and we have one that's templates. So these are the 510K templates for our clients, and we're always supposed to go back to the blank template, not take somebody else's submission and edit their submission and swap names, because then you could have accidentally the company's name or product somewhere in that submission, and that's embarrassing. But it also is potentially a lawsuit, so we want to avoid those. But I can say honestly, I've done it. Tiffany yells at me every time I do it and says it's not really saving you time, it's introducing error. Don't do it, go back to the original. um, and it's true. And I've repeated that so many times as a quality manager. Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. But what do I do myself? Every once in a while I get lazy. So bad, Rob. Don't do that. You should always go back to the template. We created this new template, use this template. And the way you know it's an original template here, not a client's, is it has Medical Device Academy's name up here instead of a client. So one of the first things we do is we update the top header here to indicate the client's name and the product name, and we save it in their folder. Do not accidentally overwrite in the original templates folder. If you do, let me know so we can double check it. Don't panic. It's not a big deal. We can recover things that have been overridden. We just go back to a previous version and Dropbox makes it suddenly reappear. So it's not a big deal. But the thing that we added here is this item here, response memo regarding FDA concerns and questions in pre-submission. So if you have a pre-submission meeting with the FDA, there are almost always concerns or questions that are raised that were not completely resolved. And so if the FDA said, we would really like you to see you do an animal study that wasn't in your testing plan, you might choose to disagree with the FDA and say, no, we're not going to do an animal study. This is how we're going to address it. We might do a cadaver study instead. We might do a human clinical study, maybe a first in human study. We might do finite element analysis. We might figure out a way to simulate this. But if we choose to disagree with the FDA, we need to explain how, and that has to be addressed in the submission. So any open items that where the FDA said do this or suggested this or had a concern or a question, you need to address that. So go point by point through your pre-submission meeting questions and the FDA's response, and make sure you address each of those things. And this little line item is to remind us of doing that. So we remember, oh yeah, I got to ask the client, did they do a pre-submission? Have they had any discussions with the FDA? Because just because we haven't doesn't mean the client hasn't. And if you are doing your own submission, if you've had any pre-submissions with the FDA, you got to cover that in your 510K. And later on, one of my questions is, how do we put that in eStar? Because I didn't see that as a place for an attachment. I didn't see that as a question. I did see, are there any previous discussions with the FDA? And I think that's where you would include it. But that's internally as a team, we got to figure that out. So this was the big change that I made, was adding that one line. I did notice that we had a line in there that was obsolete, that was about previous what do I want to say? Previous in a previous version of 3514, which is the FDA review submission cover sheet, there was not necessarily enough room for all the standards you might have. So if you had an electromedical device with software and maybe some performance standards and biocompatibility and sterility, you might have 20 different standards that you got to reference. But there was only room for 7, I think. So you needed a supplement page that you had to include in the submission. Now 3514 has been updated and you should be using the updated version, and it allows you to just add rows for as many as you need. So that's a really nice feature. So use that. And if you're using the new eStar template, it already has that functionality built in. So we didn't need that supplement document anymore. So I deleted it from our template. One of the things I also added in here was some common things that we have to remind the client of. So we use this table of contents document as our tool for project management. It's just a simple red light, green light approach. If it's red, we don't have it. It's green, it's okay to submit to the FDA. And if it's yellow, we have some items to finish. So this particular top item here, we're waiting for the client to pay the user fee. They don't have to pay that until just before we submit the 510K, but it's a reminder. And I can't tell you how many clients like, oh yeah, I have to pay that. It's just a reminder. So that's something that we haven't read because we don't have the form. Once they make the payment, then they'll have the form and we can change that to green. It's almost never yellow. Table of contents, and the one time I did have it as yellow, the company had a problem with a payment and they had to change the ID number and transfer the funds. And that took about a month. So if you have a problem with the payment, build in a month into your schedule because it's either going to be a delay before you submit or after you submit, but there will be a delay. That's when you get put on user fee hold as a side. So the table of contents is almost always in progress because we start with a template. The things that we typically have to put into the user fee cover sheet, we need the submission date, that's at the very end, the payment ID after they pay it, the model numbers. A lot of times the companies don't give us model numbers until they give us the labeling, and often at the end of the project instead of the beginning. So that would be very helpful. And then the recognized standards have to be added to the end. So you add rows for each standard. This response memo read, we don't know how many pages it's going to be. If you didn't have a pre-submission meeting, you didn't have any previous submissions with the FDA, then that row just disappears. You delete the row, no big deal.
Question on that.
Yeah.
So the response memo, that would not just be for pre-subs. That would also apply to if they had a submission that they withdrew or that was rejected by the FDA.
Yep. Yeah, and there's not really enough room there for putting all that. But what we could do, you've done this before, you could just go into that template and add a comment with a comment feature, and it'll show off on the right-hand side. So if you wanted to do that, add more detail. There are templates, and it's no big deal to delete comments, but if it prevents somebody from making a mistake or provides guidance to somebody that's using our templates, whether they're internal or external, that's awesome. And that's the way everybody should do it. If you think of a question, if you think of a comment, something like that, don't hesitate to use the comment feature, go up to review, comment, and highlight the area and ask a question or make a comment or suggestion or something like that. And if you don't want it to show up publicly to all our customers that are using our templates, then just save it on your desktop and then email it to me, and we can discuss it. Down here below, I had need to determine RX only or OTC. So I just threw out that out as an example. A lot of times we'll already know what the indications for use are because we had to figure that out to just figure out the regulatory pathway. If we're doing a 510K and we don't know what the indications are, we've gotten too far ahead of ourselves. We really need to know what the indications are going to be. Small changes, maybe, but ideally you don't want to make any changes to the indication for use. You want it to be almost identical to the predicate device. And the only thing that I could foresee asking a question on Form 3881 at this stage of the project where we've initiated a 510K submission, it should be, is this RX only or OTC? And it could be both. So that's a key question. And a lot of clients just, one of the things I see a lot is they get confused between prescription home use. So the doctor prescribes it for you to use at home versus OTC. Those are not the same. We always need a client signature. Even the new eStar has documents like the truthful and accurate statement to add as signatures. And typically the device description is something we need at the very beginning of the project. So this is our template and this is how we use it. We communicate in red font what's missing and what we need to do. And we color code things. So when it all goes from red to green, we're done. And the blue items are indicating things that need signatures. So the cover letter needs a signature from the client. The confidentiality statement needs a signature from the client, and the truthful and accuracy statement needs a signature from the client. So those are the three that we know need signatures. There might be other things, such as like a certification of, or a financial disclosure certification or statement. So those might be things, but not always. Not always do you have one. Anything you want me to add there, Mary or Sharon? Oh, Sharon's drop off. So anything I should add?
Yeah, just
I'm
one
here.
that I
Oh,
do
okay.
is at the beginning of a project, a lot of times clients can be a little confused about what's their responsibility and what are we going to be managing.
Mhm.
So I actually usually add another column that gets deleted, but the extra column that I use is responsibilities and to-dos. So
Oh, cool.
what we do and what they do, and then that's where we put like what's in red. That's what I would put in that column, and then it just gets deleted at the end when everything's done. But just to keep track of who's supposed to be doing what from a client perspective, I found that.
So 4 years into working for me, you share this helpful detail now.
It hasn't come up. I mean, the way you do it works perfectly fine too. But I've found that clients tend to ask me that question a lot, and it's
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah, saying who's doing what, and putting in a separate column would be a cool idea. And then it's easier to delete the whole column too. And
Yeah,
you could do other things there to indicate, just like we do with comments, where you have a response, if it could be a question and then a response, and that would keep it out of this section. And it's easy to delete the whole column instead of going back and editing every single one of these rows. So I like that idea. And somebody that's looking at this, like, where are you going to put the extra column? All you have to do is change the layout of the document to landscape, and now all of a sudden you have plenty of room for an extra column. And then at
yeah,
the very end, you delete the column and change the layout.
yeah. I even just shrink the topic column to
Okay.
where I tell, yeah.
So either one works, about the same amount of work. Sharon, have you been using some other method that would be really much smarter than my method and you haven't shared it with me?
No, I have not, but I wonder. I've been using this method and it works really well, actually, because I mean, honestly, it saves you a lot of time from having to go back and go through each document to see where you are and what the status is. But in relation to Mary's comment, do you get that information based on the proposal that we write for the client? Is that how you determine who's responsible for what?
So pretty much. So there are going
Okay.
to be a few that are going to be shared responsibilities, like the
Right.
description. Usually they'll do the first draft, or the substantial equivalence, depending on the client and if what support they need. Sometimes we'll be the first one to draft that. So it does depend a little on a client by client basis, but like some of the obvious ones, like the cover sheets and comparison of intended use indications, for some of the ones that we do every time, just to take it off their plate and focus their attention on more of like the DHF type deliverables, like the testing and the software documentation, and some of the ones that they definitely need to own, just to draw their attention to the right places. But some of them are going to change each submission depending on the client.
Um, in general, for people that are new to 510K submissions, there are 20 sections in the submission. The first 13 or first 12 sections are things that we generally prepare. The sections 13 through 20 are generally testing documentation or the labeling. Labeling is section 13 that is provided by the client. Now, the device description is probably going to be prepared by the client, but it's probably one of the first documents created, and we ask for a lot more detail than they expect. So we often are helping them as a joint project to try to create a final device description, and it may not be finished until the very end of the project. But I realize now one of the geniuses of what Mary was talking about, when we are managing a project, there's us and them. We are helping them, and we think of ourselves as part of their team. We're the regulatory affairs portion of the small companies that we work with, because they don't have necessarily a regulatory affairs department that does 510Ks. They're just outsourcing that all to us, so we become part of their team for that project for maybe the next 6 to 18 months. But if you are using this method and our templates internally for your 510K, each of those rows would not be us versus them. It would be a specific person in your company. So you might have 10, 15 people in your company, and you might have half of those people involved in the project. So it's even more important to define who's doing what for each row. And maybe even indicate, if you wanted to, you could add another column like, what is the target date for finishing this item? And is it behind schedule or not? So you can get more detailed in your project management tool to indicate not only who's responsible for, but when it's due for, and are we on track or not. Another way to use that color coding, red, green, yellow, yellow, it's in progress, red, it's behind schedule, or not even started, and green, it's completed. So that would be a really helpful thing to identify subtasks that are related to a specific line item. So I could see it being a very valuable tool to add a column or two to indicate who's responsible and when it's due, and keep that up to date internally. And if you were using something like Slack internally, you might even put in the handle for that person, through out there as notes, and could do a quick search, and maybe even have the hyperlink go right to them. So you could do some cool things if you're software savvy and tech savvy. You could, to make this more interactive and communicate with different systems. So that's definitely something you could do. I even think it's something we could easily build into Asana. Asana is a workflow tool that we use, a software tool for project management. So I think I covered everything I wanted to cover with this updated table of contents. I learned something I wasn't expecting on, so thank you, Mary. And it is new, so please use the new one. And I don't think I made the old one disappear, so go ahead and move that to archives now that I've told everybody about it. And I will definitely share your idea with Tiffany, Mary, and we'll go through that, because I think she'll like that as well. And the other advantage, if we change the landscape thing, she can practice, because she always has trouble switching over to landscape view. So those of you that don't know how to change the view, it's a good challenge, a little good way to practice your formatting of Word documents, so you become faster at that. And I know that's something she always struggles with, is how do I in the 510K, we have these big wide tables for substantial equivalence comparisons, and we usually make the page wider for that. So that's always something you got to add. So the next item is the RTA guidance. And so for this, I thought I would actually go to the document. And so, sorry. So I'm actually going to exit out of this, and I'm going to stop the share that I was doing, and I'm going to do a regular share. And I'm going to go up here. I got way too many things that are open. Okay, and what I'm going to search for, really simple here, is you can use the FDA search tool, but it doesn't work as well as Google. No surprise there. FDA RTA guidance. So when you search for that, wow, how about that? The first document is exactly what we wanted. It's like Google Works or something. So when you go to this page, it's a September 2019 guidance document. They have it down here, just a description of it, but the actual document, you have to click on this download link. And so I put in the hyperlink for the previous page, not this download page. So the idea is that they would update this, what the document is over time, but that page would stay the same. Hopefully that's the FDA's intent. But this document is 102 pages. And the beginning of it is just sort of walking you through the requirements. So down to page 19 is the RTA process. And RTA stands for refusal to accept. So they do a pre-screening at the FDA when they first are doing a submission. That's where all the instructions are for the RTA screening. But the forms that they fill in, the FDA fills in, they have a primary or a preliminary reviewer that they assign to do the RTA screening, and that person fills in one of 3 checklists. There's a checklist for special 510Ks, a checklist for abbreviated 510Ks, and one for traditional 510Ks. 80-90% of the submissions are traditional 510Ks, so that's normally the one they use. But if we go back to the slide deck, this is the pages that they're found on. So traditional is 20 through 54, abbreviated is 55 through 90, and special checklist is 91 through 102. And those are the pages of the PDF. They do not match up precisely with the page number at the bottom of the document because they usually have an extra page or one less page, one or the other. So if you want to break out this checklist and fill it in yourself, you have to go into the RTA guidance document, download that, then go into Adobe Acrobat and extract those pages. So if you don't know how to do that, Adobe can help you with that, but you need Adobe Acrobat. Reader won't get it done. You could print it and hand fill it in. I don't recommend that because then it's harder for the FDA to search and it's harder for you to search and harder for you to make changes. I recommend using Adobe Acrobat, which you're really going to need to do any kind of submission with the FDA. Anyway, so get Adobe Acrobat, get the Pro version, the Pro DC version, or get Adobe Creative Suite or something, and then extract those pages and fill it in. And if you're doing a lot of submissions like us, you might pre-fill in certain sections because we already know which documents we're going to put it in. We put in volume 4, document 1, volume 4, document 2. That might be where you put those because they ask you the page numbers in that checklist. So wherever they have a requirement, you tell them, yes, it's included, no, it's not included, NA, it's not applicable, and what page number. And that's how you fill in the checklist. But it is tedious, so don't think you're going to do it in an hour. I figure it's probably a 2-hour task, but I know Mary Martinez did a couple of them for Sharon recently. And how long do you think it took you, Mary?
It definitely took like at least 3 hours for me. It really depends on how familiar I am with the project.
Okay, so 3 hours is what somebody new to the checklist can do it in. But she said it's how familiar you are with it. So there's the familiarity with the project, which was one thing, because it was Sharon's project and Mary was filling in the checklist. And then there's familiarity with the FDA submission and all the content. So I filled in that checklist more times than I care to remember. And I kind of know, I haven't gotten it down to, I know which page it's on, but I know what section it's on. And I pretty much know the wording of the question, how to answer it. But this is one of those where you do not want to copy somebody else's template and then make edits to it. That won't work well for you. Trust me, you want to work off of a template that is a generic one that's set up for your organization, and you always go back to the template, or you want to start from scratch. One or the other. And they revised the RTA guidance several times before 2019, so make sure you're working with the 2019 version. The dead giveaway is how many pages it is. I believe that we got 35 pages there from 20 to 54. So if you haven't got a 35-page document you're starting with, you've got the wrong version. That's the giveaway. If you are submitting to the FDA directly, you are not required to fill out the RTA guidance. The RTA screener is the person that fills it out. If you provide one, that can help them, but there's no guarantee it's going to help them and no guarantee they're even going to look at it. If you're working with a third-party reviewer, they request that you fill that out for them, and then they edit it. So you're required to provide one to a third-party reviewer. If you use the eStar templates, you don't need to do this because they won't do an RTA screening, because the eStar template, if it's completed, then you have included all the things that are required in an RTA screening because they have all those questions already built into the form. So that's one of the advantages. Allison Komiyama is a competitor consultant out on the West Coast, and she's used to work for the FDA. And she and I have given presentations on this before at Joe Hage's conference. And she was saying back then when they first implemented the RTA screening that we were seeing like 2/3 of the companies are getting RTA holds. It went down to below 50% in like before COVID, but since COVID came along, suddenly it went up again. Maybe the FDA is being a little bit more picky and rejecting things on whenever they can because they're behind schedule. They don't have enough resources. They have more submissions than they can handle. If you don't give them high quality submissions, they're going to reject it. They're not going to be picky. I mean, they are going to be picky now and reject anything they can. So Allison and I have both seen the number of RTAs go up as a percentage. I think we're below the 2/3 that we were at one time. But if you use an eStar, that eliminates the RTA screening. So if the average is 50% of the submissions get put on hold, when you get put on hold for an RTA, that's an automatic 2-week delay in your submission time clock because they reset the clock if you get an RTA hold back to 0 days, and they start the first day when you resubmit your RTA response. So it's minimum 2 days if you respond immediate, or 2 weeks delay if you respond immediately. And if it takes you a couple weeks to respond, now it's a 4-week delay. If you had used the RTA, sorry, I will put that on silence, maybe. So if you do the eStar, you eliminate the RTA screening process, so less paperwork for the FDA. You have the confidence you're not going to get put on RTA hold. So in theory, what should happen is you should get all the way to the AI request before your submission gets put on hold. And at AI request, they don't put it back to 0 for the time clock. They freeze it at whatever point they gave you the AI request. So in theory, this should really help out 50% of the companies substantially. Plus, you don't have to fill out the RTA checklist anymore. So, and I've already asked with Prithal Baum at RTS, she's the third-party reviewer that we use. She said we don't have to submit one. So if we're using the eStar, don't need it. So I highly recommend it, and that's 3 hours of work Mary doesn't need to do. So that's what I was going to share on RTA guidance. But if we all switch over to eStar, this goes away. But probably we'll have to continue to do a few of these because we're in the middle of doing submissions and we haven't got them. We haven't switched over to the eStar completely. So does anybody have any comments, questions, or advice about RTA guidance?
I do not.
Silence, crickets. Okay, thank you very much. So now we're going to cover this item. Oh, I hit the wrong one. Okay, so response to the reviewer. You guys can see my screen, right? Okay, so when you have holds on your submission, there are you could have an e-copy hold. If you're using our firm, that should never happen unless we have a bad flash drive. So that's a possibility. If you didn't format your e-copy, you didn't validate your e-copy, you made a mistake somewhere along the way, you'll be put on e-copy hold. You have to submit a replacement e-copy. So if you want to know about that, go see our e-copy video. You can type it into the YouTube channel, look it up. Number 2, you could be put on user fee hold. I alluded to that before. If you get put on user fee hold, count on a month. Your boss is going to say, how long is this going to take? And you're going to say, worst case scenario, I'll get this done by the end of the week, and you'll be wrong. I guarantee you it's going to take a month. And I don't know why the FDA is so dysfunctional that they can't figure out that somebody paid the bill. And it takes them a whole month to do this. A week would be rational in a normal organization, but this is the government. And so you need the system you need to update your payment, give them the documentation of that. So you might upload it to them, email it to them, and then that information has to get to the accounting department, and they have to go in and make some sort of change in the system to indicate, yes, this has been paid, and take it off of e-copy hold. And I've had twice now where I had an email saying, yes, we received it, we've confirmed it, you're off e-copy hold, and they didn't actually take it off e-copy hold, and nobody actually started reviewing the submission because somebody didn't go into the system and change the status. So there is a disconnect between people saying, yes, I received the documentation, and somebody actually triggering the new status for it's now okay to review and assigning it to somebody. So I don't know what that disconnect is at the FDA, but it's happened twice to me now. And both times it took a month and there was no reason for it. And there was a time long ago where I had something like that happen too. So 3 times actually that's been a month delay. And I was diligent and tried to keep up on it and pass to the FDA, like who's my reviewer? Who's doing the RTA screening? What's up? No such luck. So e-copy hold is easy to fix. I had it 9 times in 1 week. We've fixed that problem. Now we have it 1% of the submissions have bad flash drives. And I can't do anything about bad flash drives, but we do validate every e-copy we send out. So it was good when we shipped it. Number 2, the user fee hold, that's a disaster. Try to do everything you can to avoid that. Keep in mind, just because you paid with your credit card does not mean they have actually acknowledged receipt of that money yet. That takes usually 4 days if you're an international firm with an international credit card. That could take up to a week, maybe even 10 days. So make sure you see it coming off of being credited to your credit card account and or taken out of your bank account. And the best is to you have a US firm with a US bank. So if you're working with somebody like us, sometimes it's eliminates that delay if you send us the money and we make the payment, but there's no reason why you can't just pay it a little bit earlier so you're not cutting it so close. That's the best solution. So don't give us the user fee payment form the day before you want us to submit or the day of. That's just cutting it too close. So that's the other 2 types of hold, but this presentation is about the RTA holds and AI request holds. RTA is refusal to accept. It's the pre-screening they do during the first 2 weeks. And as I said in the previous slide, they can eliminate that entirely by using the eStar submissions. But if you're not going to use an eStar template and you're going to use your own templates like we have, then they're going to do a screening of that. And it's going to take 2 weeks at the FDA. If you're working with Prithol at RTS, it will only take like a day. But once they've done that RTA screening, then you know our submission meets the requirements and they start the substantive review, and you shouldn't hear anything back until the 60th day, which is 45 days after the RTA acknowledgement or acceptance. So either you get it put on hold, the clock starts back at 0 days. When you submit, they start the clock up again, or you get an RTA acknowledgement saying they've accepted your submission and the substantive review begins. Or the other possibility is they didn't get the RTA screening done in time, and therefore they're just going to give you they're going to pass you on to the substantive review because they couldn't get their paperwork done in time. That's happened a few times to me. So those are the possible outcomes. But if you get an RTA hold letter, you're going to get a copy of the RTA checklist, and you have to respond to all the items that are highlighted in yellow by the reviewer, and they'll say what the deficiency is, and you have to address that. The other type of hold is the AI request. So AI does not stand for artificial intelligence, it stands for additional information. And like I said before, the FDA loves their acronyms. So an AI request happens at 60 days, and they're not precisely on 60 days. I've had it as early as 57 days and as late as 61. So it's a pretty narrow window. They're on a clock, and they have a workflow management tool that's telling their boss how they're doing on the submission. And I think that variation is simply because of the weekends. They don't want to submit something on a weekend, but I have received AI requests on Saturday night around midnight. So they are working weekends with COVID, and they're burning out, and they're going to tell you what's missing. So if you get an AI request, you're going to get a deficiency letter. It's a memo that lists by number, here's all the deficiencies that we have in your submission, and you have to address each of those deficiencies. And they have majors and minors. The minors are usually something that won't require any testing. The majors are things that might require additional testing. or a justification, or you completely miss that section of the FDA. Like you don't have a level of concern document, you don't have a cybersecurity document, you don't have EMC testing to 4.1 edition, you have it to 4.0 edition. There's no evidence of that you've addressed RFID. So those are examples of things that'll get you majors. You don't have any usability testing. You don't have a URRA. I actually got 4 different major deficiencies, all related to usability one time. Told the client this is what we need. They said, no, this is good enough. The FDA disagreed. They actually did a usability test, but the FDA didn't have the supporting documentation like a use-related risk analysis, critical tasks identified, and the protocol. That was what was missing. So the FDA had them provide that as major deficiencies. So your company needs to determine whether you're going to need to do additional testing, provide a justification, but sometimes the issue is that the reviewer couldn't find the information they were looking for. So if your submission isn't organized the way the reviewer expects it to be, it might be the way you expect it to be, but not the way the reviewer expects it to be. And so that's one of the advantages of working with a firm that does hundreds of submissions. They have the experience to know exactly what the FDA expects, what the norm is. We also do e-copies for competitor consultants, so we also see how they do it. And like, oh, that's a different way of doing it, but that'll work. If we can't make heads or tails of how somebody organized it, then the FDA is going to have trouble too. So it's really important to organize it. And it could just be that information can be found in this document on this page, and here's how it meets the requirement. So it could be that simple, and that just tells you you've made a confusing submission. So those are the types of holds. But one of the things I put in here is an SIR meeting as a question. So anybody that doesn't know what this 3-letter acronym is, it's submission in review. So the FDA has the option, if you get a deficiency letter and you have clarification questions, you can request formally by, you send an e-copy requesting a meeting to the FDA saying, hey, we want an SIR meeting to clarify questions that we have about your deficiency list. And the kinds of questions you want to be asking is, if we provide this URRA analysis formatted this way and give them an example, you can't give them the whole document and say, is this okay? That's not a submission and review meeting. You're asking for clarification. So give them 1 row or 2 rows of a URRA and say, if we provide something formatted this way, and here's an example of an obvious risk, will this be good enough? If they're asking for essential performance, we believe the device has no essential performance, and here's our justification. Would this be an acceptable approach to this deficiency? Or you're correct, we forgot essential performance. This is how it was addressed in the testing. Just stating this is the essential performance, is this adequate? So you're asking, is this an adequate approach? Not, are we going to be approved if we submit this? They can't make that decision until they review everything you submit. And that's not the purpose of a submission and review meeting. It's to clarify what they want and make sure your plan for providing it fits. And you may find certain things they're just not going to give you that much detail. So you get the best you can. But the good news is the submission and review meeting takes 3 weeks to schedule. But if you wait too long after the deficiency letter to request one, they're not going to schedule one with you. So I've had one client that waited more than 60 days to request a submission and review meeting. And by then the FDA actually scheduled the submission and review meeting after the 90 days had gone by, or 180 days had gone by. So that was their way of saying, sorry, we're not giving you one. So that's a SIR meeting. It requires a formal e-copy submission, but it's really just a cover letter saying that you want to have a submission and review meeting to go over those items. And if you can provide the specific clarification questions, that would be really helpful. Then they will have time to review it before the meeting. If you don't provide the questions that you want to ask and how you're going to respond, then they don't have anything they can review prior to the meeting, and they could say, well, we don't have time to review that, so sorry, you'll have to submit a supplement. And that'll delay you further, and you may not get your answer by the time you need it. So you want to make sure that you take enough time to come up with a plan, write your clarification questions and put that in your submission and review meeting request. And it will be organized just like you would any other pre-submission meeting, but it's called the submission and review meeting request. So make sure you do that in anytime you have an AI request. The reason why is if you respond to an AI request and you don't address every single item adequately, they will give you an NSE letter, so a non-substantial equivalence letter, and you'll have to start the whole 510K process over again, just by missing one deficiency. But if you have all the items that they request and you only have to make a change to the labeling or revise one item in a document, they'll usually say, we can handle this interactively. They'll go into the interactive review mode after they get your AI response. You have 30 days to review it. They'll go in interactive mode and they'll ask you to fix that quick thing. And you might be asked, can you do it by the end of the day, or can you do it by tomorrow? You always have the option to ask for, I need time. My client's in Singapore and it might take a little longer for me to get a response. They're on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast and you're asking it after 5 o'clock. It's kind of hard for me to get, I'm not going to talk to them. Or maybe it's reverse. You're on the West Coast and they're on the East Coast and they've already gone to bed. So you need to make sure that you communicate with the lead reviewer that you need more time, and you're respecting that and trying to get the interactive review done as quickly as possible, but they will sometimes give you an extension. And I have done this successfully once. I know Deborah Arthur has done this successfully once. She's a subcontractor we use sometimes. We've actually requested extensions. So we asked, in order to address this issue, we need more time. Can we put the submission on hold for time to address this? And so if you request it, they can put it on hold and the submission gets put on hold for usually another 180 days. And I've had that happen where the changes the FDA wanted to the labeling were not trivial and they couldn't be done in the 24 hours they were giving us. And I said, time out, let's have time to do this right so we don't screw up the labeling. And so that, it might take you a whole week to make the changes, but you get it put on hold for 180 days. And as soon as you submit the corrected labeling, they'll resume the clock and review it. And by doing that, you give them more time so they can do their job properly too. So I talked about RTA holds, what they are and how to avoid them a little bit. I talked about the SIR meeting request. I mentioned the AI request. Now we're going to kind of get into the detail. So not that. I wanted to pull up our template. And so if you look at so this is our template folder. Not everybody has this. This is just for internal use, but we do share it with clients that have bought our 510K course. And so if you click on this one, we don't know whether it's going to be 21, 22, 23, but let's say it's 22 or 21. In here, we have a cover letter, an updated table of contents, and an AI response memo. And then you'll have additional documents here that are addressing the FDA's deficiencies. And so the table of contents will show you a little bit what this looks like. So if you go down to the bottom here, this is how I show it. This is volume 21. So each response, each supplement to the original submission is supplement 1, S001, S002, S003. And I have each one as a separate volume because we're only submitting the documents that are in there. But if the FDA were to ask for the whole submission again, it would be volume 21, volume 22, volume 23. That's how I personally organize it. I've done it other ways. This is the way that seems to be the most organized and least confusing to me. And I haven't had a problem explaining it to the FDA yet. And I only provide them the documents that are in that volume. I don't provide them the rest of the submission. But with eStar, we're going to have to provide the whole entire submission again with the updated documents, and we're going to have to change it from traditional submission to supplement. So that minutia associated with how to navigate eStars for supplements is something we're, as a team, going to have to experience because we haven't done one yet with a supplement. So that's something new for us to work on, but I don't think it'll be difficult because they give instructions and they have a way to switch it, and you can just copy, you use the old version, edit it, and submit it to the FDA, and all you're submitting is that one file. So you're going to label the file as whatever the K number they gave you is, and then S001. And if it's the second submission, it's going to be S002. So an RTA would be S001, RTA2 would be S002, AI would be S003. So it's just each one is sequential. If you have if you had an e-copy hold, that would be an A001, but it's an amendment. The FDA wasn't able to receive your original one, so it's A001 for the e-copy replacement. There are other cases where I've had that as well, where we've had an amendment where we submitted the wrong version to the FDA, realized it after we dropped it in the FedEx envelope, and had to send them an amendment. And if you communicate, this one is not correct, please ignore that one, take on this one instead, and that'll get a new number. And they reflect that in their submission history. So that's sort of the explanation of what this part is over here is. But what we usually provide is the cover sheet updated, so it indicates a supplement, the table of contents, the whole letter. You also need in here a cover letter. So I don't have that listed for some reason. So that's something I need to add. I'm going to add it right now because this is our template. So I need to redo the numbering.
Sometimes in fact, I think I almost always combine the cover letter with the response memo.
Yep, I've done that as well. I can even write that here. Could be combined with response memo. And the example that I was going to provide is right here. And this is not combined with a cover letter. So to look at what a cover letter looks like, for those of you that haven't done this before, there. Whoop, that's not the right one. Shoot. That's the obsolete document that we need to archive. Cover letter. So this is what a cover letter looks like. And the Biologics Division is no longer accepting any e-copies. So we can delete this and save it. But typically when you're submitting, you don't have this number. So that would be not available yet, or NA. And if you don't use a consultant, you wouldn't have this submission. You might not have this submission contact, but you could. You could have the contact person for the company and then the submission person in your company, if you want to have two different contacts within your company. But typically this will be our client contact and our company's contact. And then you have some more administrative information about your submission and any previous document numbers. That's critical. So I give you some examples here. And then an e-copy statement. And then some information that the FDA wants on your submission. And then down here, you would have this concluding mark, or if you're using a consultant, put this kind of wording here instead. And this section here only applies if you're doing miscellaneous files or statistical data. So they might not be applicable and you delete that whole section, or you might delete half of it if you're having one or the other. And for the eStar, that all disappears and we have a different eStar statement. So in our eStar folder, I have a different cover letter created specifically for eStar. So that's what our cover letter looks like. And as Mary was saying, what she does often is instead of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't include this stuff again. And you instead put the responses to the AI request or the RTA, and then
Yes.
probably up here you would list the original submission.
Yeah, so under the reason for the 510K submission, I will say like reason for the 510K supplement, and then I'll explain
Right
the
here.
response to an AI request, and the detailed responses are in the table below. And normally I'll have like an appendix with the responses,
Mhm.
and then the rest of it would be similar.
Okay. So that's how we use the cover letter. But you can have them as two separate documents, or you can combine them together. There's not a right or a wrong way. Typically, the reason why I would try to separate the two is because I have trouble getting somebody's signature sometimes, and I need a signature on the cover letter. So I'll have one person sign it while the person that I'm doing most of the work with, interacting with in the company, that is not the signatory, and they're helping me with the final response memo. But if the person that's signing is also the person that's helping you with that, then it makes sense to combine the two. So there are some practical reasons why you might separate them, just to facilitate getting a signature in time and not having that be a bottleneck.
Yeah, and also if the response is very long, this is the one document that you print to send. So
Mhm.
sometimes if the response is really long, it would probably be better to separate it out in
Yep.
that case.
So I have one here. So if you're doing an e-copy, I don't know if everybody can see my video. So if you're doing an e-copy, this is typically what they're going in as a FedEx envelope, and we slap a flash drive in it, like this one here. So but you also have to have the cover letter printed. And if you're going to do a response memo combined with a cover letter, that makes it for a much longer document, and you might not want to burn that many trees. So that's a good reason to split them up. Some people will combine them all into one gigantic PDF document. So all the responses and the cover letter and everything all into one document. And when we have that, we just extract the part that is going to be the cover letter and print just those 2 pages. So that way we don't kill so many trees. Same thing for like a meeting minutes for a pre-sub meeting. We won't print all the slides. We'll just print out the cover letter. So those are some things that we do. But I think the part that I haven't really covered that's kind of important is just the basic logistics of how do you respond. It's this part right here. This is the key. It's really not super critical, not super complicated. Just create a table. The FDA loves tables. So do notified bodies. So does Health Canada. Just create a table saying, here's what you asked for, and right below it is how we're going to respond to it. I color code it. I make what the FDA said black, and I copy and paste it right out of the deficiency letter. And then right below it, I put in blue font what our response is. Now, you are going to find typos in deficiency letters. I don't think I've seen one yet without a typo. If it bothers you to have a typo because the FDA made a typo and you want to correct it, that's okay. I give you permission. And I haven't had any FDA reviewers complain that I corrected their typos. I wouldn't recommend pointing it out to them. I would just fix it if it bothers you. If it doesn't bother you, just leave it incorrect. It's okay. And I know there are some people out there that are quality assurance people, and this causes them anxiety and causes them to lose sleep. Just curl up with your label maker under your pillow and think happy thoughts, and you'll be okay. I'm poking fun at all the QA people out there because I'm not really a QA person, if you've noticed. I do things a little less organized and haphazardly. I'm doing a live presentation here. I'm recording it and I'm fixing things as I go. So this is how I work. I'm very high level, like a CEO that doesn't like to worry about the details until I'm doing a submission. So I have to take off the CEO hat and I have to put on the consultant hat, and okay, now I have to worry about the details. And this is just one thing you don't need to worry about. Trust me. The FDA reviewer does not. They make mistakes. They make typos. We make typos. They don't give you an NSE letter for a typo, and you shouldn't be making a big deal out of them making a typo in their deficiency letter. So if you want them to have an attitude, go for it. So that's one of the things I have for people, but make it simple on yourself. Just a table, number the table. So they have 9 deficiencies, you have 9 responses. And if they break it up into bullet points, they might number it 1, 2, 3, 4 in bullet points. They might just have bullets. They might have letters A, B, C, D. Follow what they do. Follow their system and break it up as cleanly as you can. And when you go from majors to minors, have a break in the table. Create a new table for that. But the idea is to make it neat and organized and show up above. Here's what the FDA said, and here's our response. If you can put all the information in that table, that's great. If you need a supplement document, then say that can be found in document 4, document 5, document 6 in our response. So you don't need a hyperlink per se. You just need to reference what document it is and have the documents numbered correctly. And so that might be a last minute change you're making to the response memo. So I think that covers everything on how to create response memos. We don't have a template here that has the table all filled in for people because you'd never know. We're going to have 1 deficiency, 20 deficiencies. The record that I've seen is 48. It's not a contest you want to win, but if anybody's got more than 40 out there, you've done very well to make as many mistakes as you possibly could. You probably should have hired us and avoided a few of those. But the shortest I've seen 1. I've seen a deficiency, 1 minor deficiency. Somebody felt the need to put it on AI hold for that. That should have been handled as an interactive, but they did it formally and put it on hold, probably because they were running out of time. So there's nothing wrong with that. You just respond quickly. But the more common is like something in the 7 to 10 range. Wouldn't you say that's typical, Sharon and Mary?
That's fair. Mhm.
Okay, so normal is 7 to 10. So if you got 6, think of yourself as an above average performer. Okay. If you had 11, you're not going to get fired. The company that had 48, I actually got them clearance. I didn't have to do a resubmission. So we actually addressed all 48 findings and within the 180 days. So it can be done. In fact, you could redo all your testing in 180 days as long as you don't have a clinical study or an animal study. So that's sort of the borderline. They're like, could you redo all your electrical safety in 180 days? Yes, you could. Could you do a usability study in 180 days? Yes, you could. Could you do biocompatibility in 180 days? Unless you have an implant study of 13 weeks, yes, you could. So that's sort of the threshold. When you have to do an implant study of 13 weeks or you have to do a clinical study, that's or a full-blown animal study, that's when you're going to have trouble hitting the 180-day mark. So if you have that problem, you might want to even withdraw. But you, in general, when I have companies that are in that situation where they can't finish it, my recommendation is you're better off trying to address everything that you can, submit what you can, and try to get as much of the deficiencies resolved as possible. So in your resubmission, you only have a couple of things to address instead of the 48 items. If you withdraw, then you have all 48 items to address. Use this reviewer's time and this submission to address as many as you can so the next one's faster. And yes, you will have the FDA suggest you should withdraw that. Why? Because it means less work for them. If you withdraw, they say, it's sort of like SEAL team, dropped upon request. I don't have to do any more paperwork. I don't have to go through the process of watching you out of the program. You don't have to give the person an NSE letter, and that's all that paperwork eliminated from their workload. So they, of course, want you to withdraw, but it's helping the next reviewer if you finish the job and get as close to the finish line as you can. And you never know, you might surprise yourself. If you think positively and you do everything you can, you might get 47 of them done, but you might get 48. And if you get all 48 done, now you have your clearance. And that just saved you months. So, and not to mention the user fee again. So I think if we go back to our slide deck here, so that covers this slide. If anybody has anything they want to add, please do. But that brings me to the E-Star. So the things that I had down that I haven't done yet, because we haven't had an E-Star that the FDA's given us a deficiency letter on yet, I don't know. We're not going to have RTAs because they aren't going to do an RTA screening for an eStar. So that's great. But the AI requests are going to come. And with the AI requests, where do we put that? And I think the answer is this is going to be a supplement, and you're going to indicate, you're going to attach like a new cover letter and attach a response memo in in that section for cover letters, and then down below wherever the deficiencies are, you're going to add documents to each of those deficiencies. In your response memo, you're going to say, in like the EMC section, we added a new test report. In the EMC section, we added an essential performance document. In the software section, we added a cybersecurity plan, which we were forgetting because that was one of the items missing in the eStar. So beware of that if you use the eStar there. From there, that's the one thing I found missing. They're missing the cybersecurity plan for post-market surveillance. But I think everything that you would normally do, you just attach as a response memo at the beginning, indicate it's a supplement, and reference in your response memo where all the other attachments have been added. And that should be all you need to do. But you submit the whole entire submission again instead of just the changes. So that's an important detailed difference from the way we're currently doing AI responses. So watch this video. If you're watching this video on YouTube, watch this video, eStar submission video, on our YouTube channel as well. But does anybody have any comments about eStar or ideas or questions or problems, or not yet?
Not yet. I need to look into it a little bit more. I'm sure I'll have questions.
It's a 40-minute video, or just under 40 minutes. This is the actual slide from that I screen captured from the video. So shows you how long it is, and the title is at the top there, and you'll find it on our YouTube channel. And this is thank you to Mary Martinez. I used one of your photos that you gave me in your new house, and I put in like, subscribe, and notify, because this is something I forget at every single YouTube video I do. I forget to tell people, like, please, down below, like, press the button. Our granddaughter says, if you like octopuses, don't forget to like and subscribe. So if my granddaughter can remember this, maybe I can remember too. But I had to use a slide to help. And then subscribe to our YouTube channel, because that will help us, so we can have more people looking at our video. It'll bump up in the rankings for YouTube, and we'll have more people watching. And then last but not least, notify. So did you know that like 94% of the people don't subscribe to your video that are watching it? So they found it useful enough to watch the 38-minute video, but they didn't click subscribe to see the next one that's also free. I don't get that. But then they also didn't click, like most of the people that click on subscribe don't click notify. Now that I understand, I don't want my inbox full. I understand that. But if you're spending 38 minutes watching a video on eStar and you're not clicking notify of more videos from our channel that are going to be on 510K submissions, either you've decided you're not going to use our firm and you're going to use somebody else's and you're outsourcing it all, or you just know more than I do about 510K submissions and I should be watching your channel. So if that's you, send me an email and I'll like and subscribe your channel. Okay. So please
One
like,
more thing
subscribe,
that
notify.
one more
What?
thing that also helps is commenting on the videos. So
Oh yes, I need to put
let-
comment. Thank you. Yes, comment on the videos, because I said in the eStar video, please let us know what we should do as future webinars or future live videos, because it's your channel. I observed when I was looking at the demographics, like, 100% of the people that watch these videos are under 45 years of age. I'm not. So I might be slightly out of touch with this generation that's watching my videos. Thanks to Adrian, I don't feel so bad. He says I really get this generation, but I'm sure my children feel quite differently because I don't know how to access my Instagram account hardly at all. And they know me better. So I love technology. I'm trying to stay on the cutting edge, but write in the comments, tell me what we need. Another thing that I'm consciously trying to do is show you that let's hide Rob because we don't care about him. Let's show the 4 fantastic 510K consultants that are on our team. You notice all of them are women. So I have learned that men aren't necessarily the best team employees over time. And I definitely have a preference for hiring women to work for my firm, not for any reason that would get me sexual harassment claims, but because I know women tend to cooperate better in teams. And that's been proven many, many times. You go to any MBA program, the one that's getting really getting along really well with the rest of the team is usually the woman, and the guy has got too much testosterone and has got to be in charge. I don't know why that is, but I've learned. What I haven't figured out how to do is keep the mouth shut and let the women talk. I like to talk. So that's why you're all invited. I've been trying to encourage you to talk and show more of you. So I'm hoping you do more videos for our audience, and I do fewer of them. Yeah, fewer of them. And maybe we have you speaking and I'm in the little window and you can ask me questions. And our graphic designer came up with a really cool finishing slide. So hopefully in the future, this will not be my picture. It will be somebody else's picture, and it will be somebody else's name and somebody else's contact information, because that's how to get a hold of me. But I would much rather have you getting a hold of one of the 4 consultants that are on the screen, because they're probably going to do your project because I need to run the business. So I do work on 510Ks, I work on de novos, but I'm trying to do less and less of them and just help out where needed. So I'm the backup plan, not the primary plan. One of the 4 ladies on the video, they're your primary helper. And honestly, Mary and Sharon are probably capable of doing the 510K better than I am. And now that they've got minions that are working for them that are doing a fantastic job and will have their own 510K projects all by themselves next year, we have a hell of a team. I'm really happy with it. So don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. That's it for today. Ladies, have any further comments?
No,
Nothing from me.
Was it an improvement from my previous videos? This is where you just nod your head
Yeah.
and then tell me later what I did wrong.
No,
it's a trap. Your videos have always been perfect, Rob. I don't even know what you're talking about.
same here.
Yep, this is where the auditor asks a yes or no question because they really just want yes, Rob, you did a great job.
No,
But
all good.
tell me what I can improve later, because we are trying to improve. Thank you, everybody, and have an awesome day.
Thank you.